Um, this weekend, Justice Scalia tragically passed away in, was it Nevada? I think it was in Nevada, somewhere on a hunting trip. And the world began to mourn. Well, half the world, half of America started to mourn. The other half started to rejoice. And Justice Scalia, listen, there's so many things that I want to say about this guy. The first thing I want to talk about is whether or not people should have been rejoicing. I mean, people were out dancing, like dancing a jig. Like they were really happy that this guy died. And I was torn. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm torn in myself. I was torn because I don't celebrate people dying. Right. That's just not me. You know, I think too highly of human consciousness. Right. It's so rare, you know. So I was really torn. I'm like, oh, I know this guy. I know this guy was a complete jerk. But, you know, in Texas, thank you. My producer got me straight. It's Scalia passed away in Texas. But so anyway, but somebody brought something to my attention that really just cleared up my understanding. Right. I'm not always right. There was an article that I read about Margaret Thatcher when she died, and it really put into context that a person who has a public persona, one that and not only a persona, but has had impact on the lives of millions of people, and a negative impact on the lives of millions of people. They are a public persona. We have no obligation to give deference to the fact that they are dead, because now they're dead. It actually presents an opportunity for something good to happen. That was the first article that changed my mind. And then there was a tweet that came around. My homegirl, April Rain, she retweeted this guy who said, "It's funny, the only people we talk bad about after they're dead is unarmed black kids." I will applaud that tweet myself. So with that being said, I stand corrected, because I was trying to do this, you know, and I was being true to myself, because I don't really celebrate people dying. But I do celebrate the opportunity for something good to happen, and for a person who has had a very negative influence over America to now no longer have that type of influence over America. You can just take a gander at any issue, any sensitive issue, any extremely important issue, a woman's right to choose, a gay marriage, marriage equality, the Voting Rights Act, affirmative action. You can go down the list of things where Justice Scalia always stood on the opposite side. And not only did he stand on the wrong side of history, he did so with some of the most vitriolic language, and wrapped it in his intellect, because he was an intellectually brilliant guy. But sometimes you're intellectually nefarious. And so he wrapped these insults and these condescending words, and not only the language, but his actions had ramifications for almost 30 years on the lives of so many Americans, that it is understandable now to me to see people celebrating the death of a man who has had such a negative impact on America. I feel okay with it now. It took me a while, because I hated to see people celebrating the death of anyone, but I learned something new this weekend. I grew, and I grew to the point where it's understandable that, you know, we don't have to, you know, when somebody's private and they die and they led a private life, and they may have done some bad things in their lives, but they did bad things, and you know what, just, you can leave them alone. When somebody has had 30 years, since Ronald Reagan, this guy, Scalia, has had more impact on the lives of you and me than almost anybody else, especially if you're under the age of 35. You have lived in a world that was crafted by Ronald Reagan and Antonin Scalia. And so I just wanted to just kind of take a minute there to, and I guess, what's the best way to demonstrate? The best way to demonstrate is one of the last things he said, right? His last thing that he said about on the case of affirmative action, dealing with this young lady who was suing because she did not get accepted into the school of choice. And then he brought up that he believes that African Americans would do better at less elite schools, less vigorous schools. insinuating, taking a piece of evidence, taking a piece of research, rather, a controversial piece of research, a research that suggested that we don't perform as well when we are accepted. African Americans don't perform as well as when we're accepted based on affirmative action. This research has been questioned. This research has all but have been debunked. And yet Scalia introduced this in the Supreme Court of the United States as an assertive statement that African Americans just do better at poorer schools. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of what this guy was, right? I mean, the rulings that he has stood on, the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, you know, categorizing the Voting Rights Act as racial entitlement, when in actually Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act was protecting minorities from having impediments to voting be passed in counties across the South that were notoriously, that's the word I'm looking for, notoriously guilty of infringing on the rights of minorities. Yet he called that a form of racial entitlement. I mean, take your pick. I don't think, let me move on. Here's the other thing. The fact that Republicans have politicized this man's death before his body was probably removed out of the hotel room. Immediately after he died, they went into, you know, let's lock this down. We're not going to approve anyone. No, President Obama should not nominate anyone. And we want to wait till the next election. So seeing as they have absolutely no regard for the death of this man, why the hell should we have any regard for the death of this man, especially because we feel like he was just a repugnant piece of human matter? And so I guess I've come full circle. I'm just having a conversation with you guys because I was on the opposite side of the fence on Saturday. I'm like, let's at least give it 24 hours before people start dancing and cheering and rejoicing. But when go and read some of his quotes, go and read some of the things that this guy not only said, but what he actually did. And you realize that the world is going to be a better place now that he's gone.